Can two cities that are right next to each other really be that different from one another? Well, yes, but the real question is, which one is better, Saint Paul or Minneapolis? Minneapolis is like Saturday night and Saint Paul is more like Sunday morning. These two cities have completely different vibes and energies, even though the Mississippi River is basically the only thing that separates them. Minneapolis is more modern, trendy, and lively, and Saint Paul is older, quieter, and more stately. You're more likely to find people in Minneapolis that make it a point to bring up in every conversation how they got rid of their car and now they only bike everywhere. In Saint Paul, you're more likely to find people that don't really give a shit what you're doing. Minneapolis has about 100,000 more people than Saint Paul. Population of Saint Paul is like 307,000 and the population of Minneapolis is around 425,000. If you are familiar with both these cities and you like one better, I would love to know what you think, so please let me know in the comments. And if you are thinking about making a move to either city or the surrounding suburbs, please feel free to reach out to me. I would love to hear from you. You're not bothering me. I'd love to help you guide you on the journey. The nightlife in both these cities is pretty different. Saint Paul is known to be a sleepier city, so a lot of places are going to close down early, especially in downtown. But I would say that it does have a more local vibe to it. There are a few places on West 7th that are open late, like 1 or 2 a.m., but I think a couple of those are only open late on the weekends. Minneapolis, on the other hand, is a lot more lively, and you have a lot more options for late night bars and nightclubs, music venues, and other events going on. Both cities have a great selection of breweries. Minneapolis has about 33 and Saint Paul has about 18. But if you're a beer drinker, you probably know that it's not the quantity that really matters. It's which kind of beer you like, the quality. So if you like Surly more, that's Minneapolis. You like Summit more, that's in Saint Paul. Minneapolis may have Saint Paul beat when it comes to the arts. Minneapolis has more artist lofts and galleries and murals painted throughout the city. And then there's the Walker Art Center and the Sculpture Garden and Art-A-Whirl, which is the largest open studio tour in the country. And that's held in Northeast Minneapolis. Saint Paul does have its own art fair, but it attracts about half as many people as Art-A-Whirl. Don't get me wrong though, both are definitely important for connecting the artists and the arts with their communities. Minneapolis definitely outshines in the music scene as well. Of course, you have First Avenue, which is where Prince started his entire musical journey, and about hundreds of other venues throughout the city. And if you like electronic music, you're definitely gonna find a lot more of that in Minneapolis. So I grew up in a suburb of Saint Paul, and whenever my aunt would watch my sister and I, she would take us to a bunch of different parks in Saint Paul. So I definitely have a lot of fond memories. I also lived on the west side of Saint Paul and Frogtown briefly, but more in my early 20s, I lived in Minneapolis, in north, northeast, south, and downtown Minneapolis. I would say that I don't necessarily have an allegiance to either, but I will admit that Minneapolis has more of the things that I like. So how do the costs compare? Well, the median sales price in Minneapolis for single-family homes is about $325,000, and it's only $282,000 in Saint Paul. So Saint Paul is slightly cheaper, but really the home prices are going to vary extremely significantly based on the neighborhood or community that you're in within the city. So there are going to be some Minneapolis neighborhoods that are cheaper than neighborhoods in Saint Paul and vice versa. Another thing that's important to mention is that the property taxes tend to be higher in Saint Paul. I've watched several videos that say the opposite, that Minneapolis has higher property taxes, but I found the opposite. So Minneapolis is in Hennepin County, and Hennepin County has an average property tax rate of 1.33%, and Saint Paul is in Ramsey County, which has an average property tax rate of 1.47%. So they're actually lower in Minneapolis. Honestly, I've seen some homes in Saint Paul that were listed for $200,000, and the property taxes were like $3,800. Of course, I had to see how NerdWallet compared the two, so I put Minneapolis and Saint Paul in there. NerdWallet said that Saint Paul is like 1% cheaper than Minneapolis, and that's including like groceries and housing and transportation costs and a couple of other things, I think. But if you're trying to lower your grocery costs, I would focus more on where you're shopping rather than which city you're living in. So definitely check out Aldi, great low-cost grocery store. And I also have a whole video about the cost of living in the Twin Cities if you want to watch that. But I do want to mention one more thing about the cost of both cities. So Minnesota has a minimum wage of $10.59, but that's actually higher in both Minneapolis and Saint Paul. The minimum wage in both cities is $15.19 for any employer that has more than 100 employees. So both cities definitely have a really good food scene. I actually read this article once and I really like the way that they put it. They said that Minneapolis rocks and Saint Paul is on a roll. That's kind of how I feel about it. In both cities, you're going to be able to find a wide range of experiences, from fine dining to awesome divey hole in the walls. But I would definitely say that Minneapolis has more variety, and if you're looking for Asian food, Saint Paul would probably beat Minneapolis on that. The restaurants really tend to cater to the city's energy as a whole, so if you're looking for something more lively, more trendy, definitely check out Minneapolis. If you want something that has a more local and residential feel, check out some more restaurants in Saint Paul. But really, I would just say try places on both sides of the river. So the transportation of both cities is going to differ slightly in Saint Paul. Of course, if you live there, you're going to get used to it, but the layout of Saint Paul was definitely made by a drunk person, and Minneapolis is laid out like a grid. So in Minneapolis, if you miss a turn, you can make a couple other turns and get right back on track. Whereas in Saint Paul, you should definitely make a U-turn because you're going to get lost without a GPS. Also notable is that the roads in Minneapolis, although obviously not the best after winter and all the potholes and everything, are better maintained than the roads in Saint Paul. Both cities offer pretty decent systems of public transportation. You do have the light rail that goes through both downtown Saint Paul and downtown Minneapolis, and also goes south to the airport and the Mall of America. But if you are relying on public transportation, you're definitely going to have to rely on the bus systems as well, because the light rail won't get you everywhere you need to go in either city. If you're commuting by bike, Saint Paul is more hilly than Minneapolis, so it may not be the best if you're not looking for an intense workout on your way to work. Both cities definitely have paved trails and bike lanes, but Minneapolis definitely has more miles of bike lanes and more protected bike lanes. And it also has the Ground Around Scenic Byway, which is a beautiful bike trail that goes all around the city, around the chain of lakes. That connects to the Greenway, which is a bike path that's completely tucked away from cars. And that also connects to the West River Parkway. So biking in Minneapolis is probably gonna be a little bit easier if you have to commute by bike or if you just enjoy biking. Minneapolis is considered the most bike-friendly city in the country as far as I know, and Saint Paul on the same list ranked number 7. So if that's important to you, definitely take that into consideration. Because winter tends to last kind of long in Minnesota, it's definitely worth noting the differences between the two skyway systems. So if you don't know what a skyway is, it's a series of footbridges that connects the building that's enclosed so you don't have to go outside. Pretty awesome, especially for people in Minnesota in the winter. So Minneapolis has the world's largest continuous spanning skyway system, and it's 9.5 miles, and it connects 80 blocks. So, and Saint Paul actually has a skyway system that's only 5 miles. However, one very notable difference between the two is that Saint Paul actually, the skyway in Saint Paul is publicly owned and controlled instead of privately owned and controlled by each individual building like it is in Minneapolis. So it's more accessible to all people. If you're not familiar with the skyway system in Minneapolis, randomly certain sections will be blocked off, and it can be annoyingly unpredictable. As for the outdoors, Minneapolis and Saint Paul usually rank within the top 5 for best park systems in the country, although Saint Paul usually outranks Minneapolis. Based on the criteria used to rank them, they're super close, but Saint Paul does have a better distribution of parks across all neighborhoods and more residents that are within a 10-minute walk to a park. But as far as which one is more beautiful, well, that's definitely subjective. They both have amazingly beautiful parks. Como Zoo in Saint Paul is gorgeous and has like 12 different gardens, and there's also Harriet Island Park where you have beautiful views of the Saint Paul skyline and the Mississippi River. And of course in Minneapolis, you also have Boom Island Park and the Stone Arch Bridge, which have beautiful views of the Mississippi River and the Minneapolis skyline. Saint Paul parks are normally less crowded than Minneapolis parks, and they have more hiking trails, but Minneapolis has more variety of landscapes because there's parks around the Mississippi River, around the chain of lakes, 5 different lakes, Lake Nokomis, all the other lakes in the city, and of course Minnehaha Falls. I'd say go to Saint Paul for beautiful parks that are away from crowds, but go to Minneapolis for more lakes and landscapes. If you want to live in a more lively, trendy, bike-friendly city with a great music scene and a grid system, Minneapolis might be better for you. But if you want to live in a slightly less expensive, less crowded, more relaxed and unhurried city, Saint Paul may be a better choice. Either way, the other one is just right across the river.